Good morning and welcome to Mantra 108, where we are working our way through the 8-syllable Viṣṇu mantra. And this mantra facilitates the return of the individual into bigger consciousness. And so we're going to talk about that bigger consciousness today. That bigger consciousness that is called Ishvara. Ishvara. So I'll wait just a few moments until I can see that perhaps others have joined me. Have a little tea. You know, I might mention also in our mantra practice that it's good to have a little water sitting with you, or perhaps a little warm tea, so that if your throat feels a little constricted, you can have a little sip of tea or a little sip of water, and it helps out. Seems to always take everyone just a little while to find us here when we log on in the morning. And so that's why I stall a bit. How's everybody doing in this crazy times that we're living in? I woke up with a very heavy heart this morning. Since this whole COVID isolation started, my husband and I kind of said, you know, we're doing quite well with this. Good morning. Someone's here, I can see, but it's so tiny I can't see who's here. So anyway, my husband and I noted that you know, early on in our social isolating and doing all that we were supposed to be doing for COVID, that we, and you know, facing the fear, facing the anxiety around that, we were typically doing very well. And then about once a week we would have an emotional meltdown. And I think we got pretty well settled into the COVID groove. And but now with first Ahmaud Arbery, and then Breonna Taylor, and now George Floyd's murders, we're back to that emotional roller coaster again, feeling a little impotent, a lot impotent really, feeling outrage, feeling sadness, feeling that we want to do something to make a difference, trying to listen, to learn what we can do to be better alliances, better allies for our brothers and sisters of color. So for me, a little bit of that that sadness and angst and feeling of impotence woke me up again this morning. So my mood is heavy today. And so when I particularly am in a heavy mood like this, my mantra practice is a haven for me. It's something that helps me to become centered, helps me to get back in touch with Source, and helps me to be stronger in my actions that are needed in this world. So let me read a little bit to you from Nikolai Bachman again this morning. Today we're talking about Ishvara. Ishvara is the source. the source of knowledge. And so what he says about Ishvara. Ishvara is described in the sutras as a kind of Purusha. Remember, we talked about Purusha as our pure inner light of awareness. So, Ishvara, the source of knowledge, is described as a kind of Purusha. Whereas Purusha is the individual soul embedded in our body and exposed to the activities occurring in our heart, mind. Ishvara is its universal correlate, unbound and untouched by anything at all. While our individual Purusha watches and is entertained by the manifest dance of Prakriti. Now remember, we said Prakriti was everything manifest, all of nature, everything, including ourselves. So while our individual Purusha watches and is entertained by the manifest dance of Prakriti, Ishvara simply exists. Ishvara is the pure light of knowledge, the macrocosmic energy of omniscience that we tap into through our inner light of knowledge and awareness, our Purusha. So we tap into Ishvara, divine consciousness, that just is. We tap into that through Purusha, that divine light of awareness that is in each of us, because that light of awareness is an expression of the divine. Ishvara is also considered a teacher, and it can bring about transformation just as a human teacher can catalyze inspiration and insight in a student's heart, mind, by the transmission of knowledge. The sutras state that Ishvara is the original and eternal teacher, not limited by time. All knowledge learned in the manifest world ultimately sprouts from the seed of Ishvara. This universal intelligence always was, always is, and always will be available to those who seek to understand the truth. Believing in something greater than ourselves cultivates humility. One way to prevent egotism is to think of Ishvara as all knowledge that ever existed or will ever exist. Then, whenever we come up with a new idea or we create something unique, instead of believing that it is ours to patent or exclusively use to promote our own self-interest, we can think of it as tapping into a bank of knowledge that was there all along. That's certainly how I feel when all of these beautiful musical compositions come through me, not created by me, but come through me from Ishvara. Surrendering and transferring the results of all action to Ishvara is a powerful practice that can keep us from thinking we are better than anyone else. Many cultures and religions talk about creation beginning with sound or light. Patanjali, who wrote the sutras, or channeled the sutras, So Patanjali says that this original sound is a direct expression of Ishvara, and therefore provides a direct link to it. In India's ancient tradition of yoga, this sound is Om. We're very familiar with that. Ishvara is, in a sense, the meaning of Om. And by saying or chanting Om, we are able to connect to this divine source of knowledge. And of course, we use this mantra, Aum, in so many of the longer mantras that we chant, including this mantra that we're working with now. A mantra is simply a sound that has a specific effect, which becomes stronger as it is recited over and over again. The more something is repeated, the more powerful its effect on our consciousness is. Repeating Om links our consciousness to Ishvara and allows us to feel its essence. Repeating Om also draws our attention inward and causes outer distractions to disappear. Sound has a way of reprogramming the consciousness and dissolving obstacles like disease and doubt. So, Ishvara, this divine consciousness, let me see if there's something else I want to read here. No, that's it for today. So, Ishvara, the source of everything, I always call it the divine consciousness. And in my tradition, I also call it Shiva. Shiva, Ishvara, divine consciousness, the omniscient, omnipresent, everything, source of all there is, and Purusha, our true self, our inner light of awareness that connects us to the divine. So, as we chant our mantra, we go inward a little bit more, and this connection connects us to Purusha and more broadly Ishvara. All right, let's start our practice. Go ahead and close your eyes. Sit tall. Begin to softening the skin, softening the muscles, softening the breath, softening the heart, mind, softening that chitta, so that we can connect more with Purusha and ultimately Ishvara. Let's take an inhale together to begin. Auṁ Namo Nārāyaṇāya. 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 Narayanaya. Auṁ Namo Nārāyaṇāya. 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 Auṁ Namo Auṁ Namo Nārāyaṇāya. 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 Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Sit with the vibration of your sound. Sit with the vibration of Ishvara. That brings us to the end of our practice today. So I invite you to just sit with these ideas of Ishvara, divine consciousness, source of everything, and Purusha, the inner light of awareness that is in us, that helps us to connect to Ishvara, divine consciousness. Thanks for being with me today. I'll see you tomorrow morning.